Hello, my name is Rosemary Loftus, and I'm coming on today to introduce a new video series that I'm working with on introducing people in higher education to working with non-traditional students. And this is a topic that is very personal to me, and I'm passionate about, because I'm a first-generational student from generational poverty with a disability, and having worked in education for 13 years now, being on educational boards, being a disability services coordinator, and currently an academic advisor, I see so many students that really want to connect with staff and are really craving that, especially in this economy, and who are nervous that maybe they're not going to make it when they get out of college. Maybe the track that they're on is not going to be lucrative when they get out. And there's a lot of fears surrounding that. And I think that we're also working with students now who are coming from cultures like the culture I came from, who we have to first establish a relationship and establish trust with before we can talk business, or before we can do the academic plan or move on to the things that a lot of staff, academic advisors, higher education administrators want to move on with these students. When you work with students, non-traditional students, you're working with students who are first generation, come from poverty like myself, oftentimes are academically unprepared, a lot of ethnic minorities, Native American students, students with disabilities. When you work with these students, you have to work within a culture that allows for them to feel safe and to build trust with you. And so I want to go over some of those things within this video on how, as educators, we can connect with students. We've got this really great and awesome job, and we have this opportunity with the positions that we have to connect and really push our students forward. But I think because resources are lacking right now in higher education, and maybe that's with all education in general, but we have this amazing opportunity to reach students and to really maximize their potential. So I want to talk about, how do you reach those in these circumstances? How do you get through to these students and make sure that these students are successful on your campus? So I'm going to go over a few things. I'm going to talk about being curious with students, asking questions. I'm going to talk about being a mentor. I'm going to talk about revealing their strengths to them. And then I'm going to talk even more about, how do we reveal those strengths, and what kind of opportunities can we give our students to utilize those strengths and use those opportunities, maybe even on our own campuses. So I talked about a little bit about my background, first-generational student with a disability. I grew up in Northern California. My first year of college, I actually lived in a motorhome. And I worked, when I got my master's degree in psychology from Humboldt State University. And then I went on to work in the educational systems, K through 12. I worked in a very low-income area for a long time as a family resource advocate. I've worked in social services. I've worked with pregnant and parenting teens. I've worked with several Native tribes in Northern California, especially on the coast, the 101 coastline. So it is very easy for me and comfortable for me to work with non-traditional students. However, I have learned, since I now work in Seattle, Washington, that is not the case for a lot of educators who have grown up in a socioeconomic class of middle class or upper middle class. A lot of times there's not that understanding that for non-traditional students, again, as I pointed this out before, there has to be some trust built before those students can learn or can use the advice or be advised by you in an academic way. So I think that's really, really important to start out with. So how do you do this? Number one, you have somebody sitting in front of you, and I think one of the best things that you can do is be curious, ask questions. When you see a student sitting in front of you and maybe they have a lot of papers, ask them, what are the papers in front of you? Is that your syllabi? What are you interested in? What is your passions? What are your dreams? What are your goals? These kinds of things. For a minute they might stop and go, wow, somebody's asking me this? How many times do students get asked those questions? And from people that really, really want to know. I think there's a lot of work to do here. I see a lot of students come through advising where we say, okay, what academic track are you on? Are you in pre-nursing? Are you doing education? Are you wanting to be an engineer? And we get right down to business and we start with their classes, but we don't start with, hi, how are you? Do you like the track you're on? What classes are you taking? Have you found passion in other areas? It's those investigative type of questions that we have to stop and begin to ask students and start that connection and really be curious and really want to know these things that students have inside of them, all these passions and to see what they're learning. I have students on a side note here, I have students that come into my office and they show me all these really cool apps that they're working on all the time on their phones. And I'm like, oh, what's that? And it can be a two-way street for educators and for students. There's so much to learn from your students. Students show me all kinds of organizational apps and different apps for writing their papers and different tools and recording tools. And I had a student the other day show me a calculator. So now they have graphing calculators, a free app for that online. Who would have knew? So I think it's this two-way street of learning, especially with technology. And once your students learn that they can be a teacher to you, it opens up this opportunity for the both of you to gain that connection and start to build some of that relationship. And then they feel that they have strengths too, and from that comes empowerment. Okay? So we covered be curious, ask questions, get involved, have that two-way learning between you and the student. Number 2, when you start to build this relationship with a student and you see them in the hallway or maybe they've come to your office a couple times, that's your opportunity to be a mentor. For students like myself who came from generational poverty and that are first generational students, we're seeking mentors or we're seeking. I have to say, actually, I think I'm always seeking mentors. It's a part of connecting with someone to have that mentorship with somebody in education, and I think students seek it more than educators or professionals would think. Students are shy. They're not going to tell you, oh, I'm seeking a mentor, and most of the time they really don't know what mentorship is. So it's so important when we see a student come back to our office several times, know that you're doing a good job. If that student's coming back, you've started that relationship, that student has started to build trust with you, and now you have an open door to reach out and begin your relationship as a mentor. Okay? I'm going to make another video in this series specifically on mentoring, and we'll talk about that more in depth on how to be a mentor, what kind of questions to ask, how to go down that path. But for now, let's just start and just to use as a tool, just consider being a mentor and letting this be a part of your path. The next part I'll address on this video is revealing strengths to your student. What kind of strengths do they have, right? So they've come to you, you've started a relationship, maybe you have this rapport with maybe 20, 30 of your students who see you often. Start to recognize when they come to your office what things they're good at, okay? If they're always on their phone and they're texting, say, wow, you're really good with technology. You may not like that they're texting in your office, and and that they're making phone calls or that they're looking at apps. But point that out as a strength and say, wow, I know that you're using your phone, you're using technology. I see that, you've shown me a few apps when you've come into my office, and I'm really excited about that. Have you considered a career in using apps or building apps or computer information science degree? And that student may go, wow, you know what, I've never even thought about that. Or they might say to you, oh, well, where can I get more skills at doing that? And you might say, well, have you thought about working in the Open Learning Center? Most campuses will have an Open Learning Center that students there's like computer labs set up in there and things like that. Maybe they can volunteer to work with students with disabilities. Maybe they want to help you coordinate a workshop where they can show different applications to other students who may want to use those apps to be for maybe anything. I mean, the sky's the limit. You could have a workshop on organizational tools for the phone, or tools to help you study, or tools for time management. All these things can be addressed. So it's kind of fun to brainstorm with students and say, oh, you have these skills, let's see where you can utilize these skills. One thing that I'll have to say about students with the iPhones or the smartphones that use the applications is a lot of your students who are using the applications and are familiar with technology are also gamers. So, if you don't get a lot of buy-in from the student, or they're not talking to you about what their strengths are, they just kind of look at you like, well, I don't know what my strengths are. I don't know, but I do game all day and I love gaming. So if I see a student wearing any type of clothing or a backpack with Nintendo on it or any kind of logo, I might ask those inquiring questions. Oh, do you game? Do you like gaming? What games do you play? Those kinds of things. Say, wow, have you thought about designing games or being in the industry or looking at graphics? I mean, there's a lot of different art institutions that we can transfer our students into. One of the local students, some of my students go to a local university, DigiPen, which is into graphics and digital design and promoting all different types of video games and everything to have to do with sound and things like that. And once you get excited about what your students want to explore and their opportunities, it ignites a passion for you too. So I really think this is a two-way street. If your students are detailed, so maybe they come in and they critique a lot of papers, or they're very good at editing essay, you might say, wow, you have a lot of great tools in editing. Have you considered working for the Open Learning Center and being a tutor there? Or have you thought about maybe advertising your skills on the bulletin board at the college and advertising yourself as an editor? The first thing they ask me is, oh, no, I never thought of that, or how much money do you think I could make, or what should I charge? And then that's another appointment, or maybe that's steering them towards a career counselor to speak with. But I have a student so I advise a student club on campus, and my club that I advise is Disability Alliance Club, and it's been just such a rewarding experience for me. And so one of the students, when I found out her strengths, was organizing other people, such as myself. She would volunteer for the office and file papers for me and put things together, and she's just been a real asset to our program. One of the things that I said is, I really think you could utilize your skills being an administrative assistant. And we kind of got talking about that, and then I had her come in and we started to build her resume and talk about her LinkedIn page and things to help her go in that direction. So a lot of times student may have these skills, but they're not really sure where those skills fit. And that can be a conversation for your career advisor on campus, or maybe a life coach. But that also can be part of your job too, is once you get to know your student's strengths, you might be the only one who has that rapport with that student to point out those strengths. And that's so valuable for students, especially non-traditional students, who really need to hear that confidence, that someone has confidence in them to point out those skills, and who think they have the ability to do it. It's so important. I'll also say, when you work with non-traditional students, you're working with students who have not had success all of the time, or academic success, or success navigating the hierarchy inside higher education, and they need to feel that, and they need to know from you as the educational professional that you believe in them and you think that they can do it. That's so key. And that belief that you believe in them and that you're passionate about what they're going to do and that you're taking the time to point out skills that they have and then incorporate those skills even further, but to let them know about careers that they may use those skills, that's the connection. That's what builds relationships. And that's how you retain students. And your students, when they have that connection, will stay and will be successful. I hope you tune in to other videos in this series. And if you have ideas, you can write on my blog and let me know what video ideas you would like to hear from, or if there's any strategies that I can let you know about that have helped me along my career path that may help you along yours. I'm always happy to share. Thank you for tuning in, and keep the passion.